Welcome to Fear Coded, a podcast where we talk about media from the horror genre and take a queer reading of a single book, video game, film, podcast, or TV show to explore just how queer horror can be. Gather round, family, because we're continuing Queer as Folk Horror, a month-long dive into the subgenre of folk horror in all its gory glory. This week we're talking about the 2019 anthology horror fiction podcast, The Old Gods of Appalachia, written by Steve Shell and Cam Collins. I'm Tyler.
I'm David.
And I'm Marilee.
And before we get started listening to the whispers deep within the mind, I want to check in and say hello with my co-hosts and find out how things are going for them. In a landscape of horrors that our real world has to offer, what's making y'all scared or what's making you feel prepared?
Well, I'll start because this should be of no surprise to anyone because I did talk about it last week. But I'm feeling incredibly prepared because my sister got married this weekend.
Yay!
Yeah, it happened a couple days ago.
Bliss.
I'm presuming, again, it hasn't happened yet. We are recording in advance, but I've been presuming it was beautiful. She was a vision. Everybody got along. The family event was great. And I just am riding the high of endorphins of seeing that and seeing everybody so happy.
Incredible. Yes, Marilee has already let the cat out of the bag, but we are recording a little bit in advance, mostly because I traveled to the United States. So Marilee, I can't ask you details about the wedding until
I
like
wouldn't
April.
tell you anyway. They're a secret. We have people. Yeah, no, like the whole thing. It's the fact that I have no media presence like that my mother is aware of that is talking about this is the only reason why I'm saying anything about the wedding at all. My mom's not invited.
Ooh.
Yes. I'm here for that. Mothers should be uninvited to more things or not invited to more things.
I agree.
Wow. Marilee, I hope that you get to have so much fun at this wedding, and now here on the other side of it, you are full of joy, and I know not cake because we talked about this last time.
I think there's probably going to be a cake, but it's not
okay.
the star is cheese.
Yeah, as well in every room that cheese is in.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that you got your Lactaid on and had some cheesy goodness, for happiness and joy and wedded bliss.
Yeah.
David, what about you?
What about me, indeed? I guess I am feeling prepared this week. I thought I'd be scared. I did think that I would be scared, but when I think about where I am now, I'm back in Valencia after my quick trip to the United States and then slow boat ride back to Europe. I am now back here home, and I don't have any more travel plans, so I finally don't have any excuse not to sit down and play a good game, and it's like the PlayStation gods heard that availability, and they have made it free for me to play Dragon Age Veilguard. So I will be tucking in to Dragon Age Veilguard, a game that I have purchased for 4 people, but did not buy for myself. So I am excited, and maybe this, you know what it is?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a reward for being such a selfless and good person.
I was literally just thinking, David, like, this is karma. Like,
this is like karma. Like, I'm a good person.
It's true, you are.
It's not instant karma, but it is delayed.
Delayed.
Karma.
Hey, no, I if I was one of those kids they gave marshmallows to, I would totally sit and look at my marshmallow in the promise of a second marshmallow while all the other kids ate the first marshmallow. P.S. That study wildly debunked. I hate that it is like the foundation of delayed gratification knowledge in psychology. Children, you shouldn't study children. Children are useless. Except for those ones from last week's conversation. Ones who carried the little baby and said, like, death be gone. I liked those kids. All other kids, you're on the list. But no, I'm excited. I like the Dragon Age series a fair bit. I don't remember anything that happened in Dragon Age Inquisition, so I hope there is a reminder in this game, or it doesn't matter. And I like buying games for people that I know, because sometimes you can't make somebody happy because what they really need is like the world to be a more just and fair place. But in exchange for $60 US, you can give them a momentary glimpse into joy. And if that is for sale and I see it in the window, I will buy it.
I
love
and
that.
treasure that. Thank you so much, David.
And also, there is information about what happened in Inquisition in the Codex in the game, so you will be safe. Also, you get to make your Inquisitor.
I do like making a character. Tyler, you might have guessed this one correctly. I love to create a character, and I know that the Dragon Age game will allow me to see that character very frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's nothing. I don't know. I feel a little bit of a way when I spend a lot of time perfecting the Argonian head of a beautiful sorceress who I will be traversing the lands with, only for me to never see her because I put some sort of hat on for defense, and B, it is a first person game, and ergo you will never see your character in Skyrim unless you go out of your way to play it the wrong way.
You mean pressing a button that switches you to third person perspective?
Yeah, where's that button located on the PlayStation? It's that giant face button, the button that you shouldn't push. It's the ugly button to go to third person.
David, if there's a button, it's meant to be pushed.
Okay,
I love pushing buttons.
Do you like pushing the giant face button on the PS5?
Sometimes.
It is no.
I like to click.
Irresponsible.
Well,
Tyler,
I'm learning so many things about my co-hosts today. Look at y'all.
We're sharing.
Tell us, are you feeling scared or prepared?
I am feeling prepared. So we have gotten our prepared trifecta in.
It's been so long.
I know.
It feels like we were all
the
scared.
Beginning of the year.
We were all scared for a little while, and then there was a combo breaker.
Still pretty scared, but at least
Yeah, sure.
So the thing that has me prepared is something that I don't think many people think of as a good thing, and it's the existence of some YouTubers.
No, you're right. I would probably have categorically put this in the other column.
I agree.
You have to give me some specifics on which YouTubers you mean, my guy.
Okay, so I mentioned this during our Excavation of Hobbs Barrow episode, but I watched a YouTuber named Gab Smolders, who is a really delightful Dutch woman that's living in the UK. She's partnered with Jacksepticeye, who is a really big time video game YouTuber. But she does these wonderful videos that are puzzle games or farming games. Sometimes she'll play horror games, but she's just really charming and cute and funny. And sometimes she'll show BB, her cat, who's got diabetes, and he has to wear a little cat sweater. Just really, really cute and precious. But we've also watched some funnier YouTuber channels, I guess, that are new Smosh, which is different than old Smosh from when I was in high school, is actually really funny and full of queer people doing really kind of goofy stuff, and not really being sexist and gross or trolling people to be mean. Actually funny kind of improv or podcasting. They do their own podcast. I would say the only thing that they do wrong is they're really big on Five Nights at Freddy's, which is Scott Cawthorn or Cawthon, whatever his name is a super Republican transphobe person, which I wish they wouldn't do. But other than that, I just putting on the YouTubes at the end of the day and just having chill videos playing or funny people being funny, and it's nice and it keeps me from going insane and staring at my phone doom scrolling.
Follow-up question.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Am I to understand from what you've just shared that when a YouTube video finishes, you will just naturally let it play another video?
Oh, fuck no.
Oh, okay.
Thank God.
Okay. Well, that did seem ripe for your indoctrination into white supremacy.
Oh my God. No. Not the white supremacy, David.
Not from YouTube? You'd be, yeah. I mean, that's, listen.
Well, that's why I said some
kids.
YouTubers, because the majority of them are horrible, they white supremacists, sexists, or pinpoint bad parts of movies and make fun of them, and I'm like, those upset me. Those make me afraid. Those make me scared. But today I'm feeling prepared because there are some good ones out there. You just kind of have to dig for it.
Can I ask a follow-up question that has nothing to do with you're prepared?
Yes.
Sure.
Tyler is at a different location than normal. Is the poster that's behind you says you can shake the sand out of your souls, but never your soul? Because I've been staring at that.
You could shake the sand from your shoes, but it never leaves your soul.
Got it. Thank you so much. I was trying to listen to you talk, and I was like, why is shoes and never so big? And I had to figure it out. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Back to YouTube. There is also a contingent of people who listen to their podcasts on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a person who listens to podcasts on YouTube?
I watched like the Smosh people do like their podcast where they're just
but that's like a video podcast.
Yeah, it's a video
right?
podcast, so it's different. I have not listened to. Actually, no, I take that back. There is a podcast that I've listened to where it's called Nobody Wake the Bugbear. And they are Australian.
D&D?
They did D&D. They have now switched over to Mothership, and they have done a lot of Mothership campaigns where they've actually used. So, like, you can listen to it and be totally fine, or if you watch their videos that come out like a month later, they actually have like maps and graphics and stuff that they'll put up, or they'll like change colors, like really cool stuff. Like they make the most of the medium. But they don't actually like film themselves playing the game. So it is still like podcasting in that way. So I have listened to a podcast on YouTube, but I also kind of watched it at the same time. I had to use both my eyes and my ears, is what I'm saying.
That's 2 of your 5 senses.
Correct. Yeah, I still have 3 more to go. I can't taste these Australians. They're too far away.
Well, but technology will continue at some point. You'd think that if you could get the taste, then the smell would be an easy delivery.
You would think that. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you just need some sort of tactile interaction, and when we're set.
Yeah. Maybe like a PlayStation 5 controller that's got like the haptic feedback.
Yeah.
But it's a remote.
Yeah. You need smell-o-vision, some sort of spritzing taste situation, vibration, and the existing 2 media that are available. I just think that there are some tech bros out in the world who should be prioritizing this instead of whatever destructive thing that they are, in fact, funding.
Well, you know that they would just be like, oh, well, we'll make it so that we could simulate what Hitler tasted like. So enjoy tasting Hitler.
Wow. I am curious as to what that taste is.
Well, are we talking about like current Hitler or like Hitler, alive Hitler?
Can we not talk about Hitler, please?
I don't know. You've introduced such a strange concept to me. I don't generally think about the taste of people. But I think if somebody said, here's a lollipop that tastes like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, I might buy it.
I would too. Are we on to something?
No.
That entire pause is staying.
Yeah.
Wow. Incredible. We are all prepared, but the preparedness comes from such a diversity for us today. And I love that. I love that we are bringing so many different perspectives into this world. And Tyler, I'm glad that there are some YouTubers in the world that bring you joy.
Yeah, you deserve it. I love joy.
I found 4 out of the 26 million.
Are you going to keep sifting, or are you good with 4?
I think I'm good with 4. I don't have that kind of energy.
Wow. Well, while your energy reserves are tapped up, let's get into today's topic, because today we are talking about the podcast, The Old Gods of Appalachia, specifically the first few episodes of Season 1 and the Barlow, Kentucky arc. All 3 episodes are performed by Steve Shell, with him also writing the first 2, and the third written by Cam Collins.
This arc of Old Gods of Appalachia follows the town of Barlow, Kentucky around the explosion of Mine Shaft Number 7, followed shortly by the destruction of Barlow, the town itself, and the things from the mine chasing after a little girl that lived in the town named Sarah Avery.
Old Gods is wildly successful in the horror fiction podcast space. Wildly. In 2022, the team behind the show partnered with Monty Cook Games to create a tabletop role-playing game using the show as a setting, and they funded it on Kickstarter. Since then, they have released several supplemental and additional adventures within the setting. There's also Old Gods of Appalachia perfumes, which I don't know what to do with, but that seems pretty cool. I looked them up. They sound like they smell great. I would like them, thank you. Including there's one that was a pre-order that you simply can't get anymore, which is a bummer. So what are your guys' relationship with Old Gods of Appalachia?
This is my first exposure to this media. This will actually be the first. Nope, that's not true, because of course I've listened to Matt Bartlett on some things, but this is the first, I guess, narrated sort of radio drama by way of podcast that I've like really sat down and committed to, outside of like my friend is in something, so I'm going to listen to a few episodes of it. And since everything that Matt was in was much more like radio play, like different people talking, and I do know that like Old Gods of Appalachia moves that direction, but this is really like campfire story, and that was unique and different.
Yeah, so as far as like this podcast goes, I briefly listened to the prologue episode while I was on a long drive, but I had to stop because unfortunately my car speakers and Steve Shell's voice did not get along. I could only hear his Appalachian twang, but I could not hear the actual words he was saying.
Oh my god!
Yeah, which is just like that's a Twilight Zone to drive through.
It's like your speaker treble. No, your treble would work. Your bass was out. Because he has a deep baritone.
Like, he certainly does. Yeah. I don't know. I think maybe like the sound mixing in my car speakers is strange. I don't know. This is a pre-owned vehicle. I don't know what they've done.
I gave a very significant shrug, considering I am the audio mixer for this podcast. I don't think it probably endeared either of you to the confidence that I have. I am very good at mixing our voices. Other people's voices, it's a hit or miss.
You're a treasure, and I appreciate you.
Well, Marilee, what about you? You were the one who brought us to Old Gods. What was your experience?
Yeah, and like looking through your notes, it does not seem like you two had the best time, and I am sorry, but I will defend my choice because I love the show. My friend Alex, who does not listen to this podcast, and so they'll never hear this, but I will give them a shout out. They recommended it on Twitter when it was very, very new. They live in West Virginia. That's where they were born and raised. They saw the name and was like, this show is probably good based on the name alone. You should listen to it. And so I did, and I thought it was great. I will say that I tend to listen to it when like the whole season's out, because the way that the narrative in this show is set up, it like dips in and out of a bunch of different stories, and I am not that smart, and so sometimes I will get confused. So I listen to it in a huge chunk all in one go. But I genuinely think that the storytelling is beautiful. I like what Steve Shell is doing, and I think that the setting is rich, and I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. But before we go into themes and stuff, what is you all's experience with Appalachia? I guess I took this for granted that this might not be a part of the world that you have been to or are super familiar with.
Yeah, I have. So my family comes from like the Rust Belt-ish region. Like they lived in Ohio for a really long time. I think they originally came from like Virginia or West Virginia, so like coal mining has been in my family for like far before I was ever a speckle in my mother's eye. Like it's I don't know. That's really kind of like the only relationship that I have to Appalachia. I know cool things about like the Appalachian region in terms of geology and stuff. But that's really it. I don't know anything else. I've never been there. Marilee, what about you?
I was born and raised in Florida, but not like the actual southern part of Florida. I lived for most of my life in the part of Florida that's mostly made up of retirees from New York and the Midwest. But I am just Southern enough to like be at least slightly familiar with like some of the stuff there. I lived in Virginia for a couple of years, but that's pretty much it. I happen to have some friends from that area.
So I lived in Maryland, but one of the things that I had an opportunity to do, and there are parts of Maryland that I suppose you could say are Appalachian, but really that's more of a West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Carolinas. But I had an opportunity to hike 120 miles on the Appalachian Trail in high school. My body was in the sort of shape that you could do that sort of thing. Well, my body could do that sort of thing. And had a fantastic time. Saw a lot of places like the places featured in this narrative. The idea of this sort of forgotten part of the world, but then there just happens to be a massive hiking trail that goes from like Maine all the way down to Florida. It's really startling, and but you would just pass rundown buildings like the schoolhouse that we would be speaking of. And so the narrative, I think, did a really good job of communicating what it is like to come upon that, but then we spend a lot of the time in the actual like time of. And I do think that like TikTok got a lot of things wrong, but one of the things it got right was suggesting that I was interested in people going into like abandoned spaces and filming themselves in them. That is correct. And the nature of abandonment is kind of frightening. And I think that a lot of Appalachian horror derives a little bit from these were places that we moved to. It was a place where a lot of potential was promised and then forgotten and abandoned. And the nature of that is very, very frightening. And I do think that's part of what makes this work as a setting.
For sure. I mean, especially because like you think about it, it's not just like economic forgetfulness, but also like social forgetfulness. We make a lot. Marilee and I are Floridians, and we're pretty used to people making jokes about like, oh, I wish we could saw Florida off from the rest of the country because Florida is just a terrible place. And I don't disagree that Florida is a terrible place, but a lot of the times when those jokes are made, it's really like in bad taste because there are many minorities, queer people, just people who are part of endangered populations, especially in 2025, who end up being forgotten by the broader community. And that really sucks. And I feel that is also something that's applicable to the Appalachian region. We often talk about them being like backwater, rednecks, whatever. And we'll make like incest jokes and stuff. But there are a lot of people who are good and decent people trying to make change happen. But because of economic conditions, social conditions, they end up being not given the resources that they could really use. And their lives end up being worse for it. Whereas everyone else gets to feel good about like they live in California or Seattle or something. They're like, oh, haha, let's just forget about people in Appalachia. They're just a bunch of rednecks anyway. And that's, that's not okay. We have to remember that it's very hurtful. And there's people who really need like protection and love and joy and are trying to make that happen. But when people really act callously about it, it hurts. And I think that actually is like a great sort of transition into talking about our themes. Because I think, Marilee, you did kind of say like David and I didn't super love this podcast, but I think the core ideas behind it are very valid and relate to what we're talking about.
Yeah. What a beautiful statement to make off of what essentially was a humble brag of me talking about hiking for 120 miles. Wow, you really clenched the gem out of the jaws of the clam that I presented to you.
Well, on that note, I'm going to jump into our themes. So,
while you're on a roll, why not?
Yeah, sure. All right. So, our first theme to discuss is different strokes for different folks, which I love that title, Marilee, for what this is. So, with Old Gods, we're talking about a vastly different folk tradition than we have for our previous episodes. While they might have similar roots in this neck of the woods, you're much more likely to run into stories of a haint than a hob. So, I mean, like, for one thing, we're no longer in the UK. We're in America. Like, specifically, this is like early 20th century America, but we've crossed the pond, and our cultures that we bring with us from, Europe and Great Britain and all of that end up melding and evolving into something else as different cultures clash and different cultures coalesce. And there is absolutely a supernatural entity at work here in these couple episodes, but I think it's also just kind of like a good representation of like things change and we bring our culture with us, and I think that's what's super fascinating about folk horror outside of Europe, is that we can see how people might rearrange a theme but are still part of like the conversation with like the larger genre.
I think for me, the part of this that was so stark is that America is so new. And in fact, it is a joke among Europeans about the newness of America. Like there are like petrified pieces of shit in the park that are older than the country that I came from. But folk horror is ostensibly about the old. And so the old versus the new, we're 4 weeks in. I got there. It is the old versus the new. I'm there. So obviously taking something that's even newer, the old has always existed because it's old. But I think that in ways that we haven't got a chance to with like Hobbs Barrow or with Midsommar or with The Wicker Man, this is like really exploring a world in which capitalism has always been around and using that to explore like nature and balance as the old, rather than just thinking about here were these creatures that we gave time and space for. Here was this like religion instead of beliefs. All of the old here in the Barlow, Kentucky story seems to be based on nature and balance and this force, and all of the new seems to be represented by greed and capitalism and materialism and forward progress. And I thought that was really unique in the things that we have talked about for this focus this month on folk horror. And so I'm stoked that we were able to come to the New World to talk about something really very, very new versus something very, very old.
I love the way you put that. That's so fun.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that it gets a little bit more complicated as the show goes on, but like for a spotlight for right here, love that. David, you're so smart.
Oh, good. Do they leave America? That would be a huge
it's
bummer.
always they're very focused on exactly where they are, and they stay in the roots of that, which I think is one of the strengths of the show.
Season 2, we're in Asia, would be such a swing.
Well, speaking of corporate greed and capitalism, I owe my soul to the company store is another theme. So corporate greed is a thread that you can find woven into a lot of American folk art and tradition. But the company isn't the only game in town where souls are concerned. However, let's just focus on the capitalism of it all first. David, I think you've kind of nailed it on the head. I really love that interpretation that capitalism is something that has always kind of existed in this area. And I think it's kind of cool to see in these couple episodes, this will spotlight how the old traditions of the green, they call it, the magic that is inherent to the Appalachian region, is combative against the capitalism of it all, which is not just like there might be some sort of supernatural relationship to capitalism in this, like maybe capitalism sort of caused a supernatural entity or something to come to fruition, or it's just much more grounded in the sense that like capitalism is already kind of super predatory and nasty, especially in this time period with this group of people. It doesn't need to have some sort of evil entity related to it. Capitalism itself is evil enough of an entity.
Well put.
Yeah.
Anything I could say would be spoilers, so I'm not going to do it. You're on your own.
Well, we will absolutely be talking about that more during this episode. But our third and final theme to keep in mind is that we dug too deep, much like the dwarves and the Mines of Moria.
Oh my goodness.
Coal mining is full of historical, environmental, and medical horrors. We crack open the skin of the world, burrow deep inside, and is it any wonder that a lot of folklore that is influenced by mine culture wonders if something else is bubbling up out of the earth?
Yeah, I particularly loved how well this story related the idea of going deep into the earth to steal from it was linked to this like unending despair of one of the characters. I did think that was incredibly well done.
I do too. Yeah. I just think that, like, first of all, that's just a really good trope. The idea that you can dig too deep into the earth and you end up finding something bad, whether that be a Balrog, whether it be whispers from the deep, or even just like, if we were thinking realistically, like natural gas that can kill you without you knowing it.
Yeah.
I think that is very cool, and I think it's very true also to this story and this setting. Especially with how Steve incorporates the idea that scabs, who are black men from Cincinnati, end up becoming victims of this greed and this digging too deep. I think it's just, it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's like I'm glad you like the Lord of the Rings thing. I did make that joke just for you.
Thank you.
But no, it's just like it was very hard when I was doing the themes. I was like, I had to eventually separate them out into two different things, but they are very much still the same theme, because in a lot of ways, the idea that we have dug too deep is like, you do that because of greed, because of like this desire for more and more and more, and not being satisfied with what you can find at like safer levels. And I just think that, the two of those things go so hand in hand here.
Mm-hmm.
They're the same theme, but in a different font.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put
truly.
it.
Well, we simply have to ask, is this horror media podcast a horror media for us to discuss on our podcast? Hey, listen, I'm here all week. Were you scared, and what do you think about this as an entry in the horror media ocean that we are covering as a pod?
I think so. I would not say that I was scared. I think the visuals that Steve came up with, some of them were really bold and very clear in my mind's eye what I was seeing. I think just the notion that we have ancient spirits and like zombie miners and possession, all of those things are like checklists for what you want to have in a horror story. Did I find the story itself horrific? Not in the sense that it scared me, but I do find the themes within it horrifying.
Yeah, I was straight delighted the whole time. Like, I understand, like, it is horror. Like, the one that they're describing is like, that's awful. It's great. Had a great time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we brushed this very lightly when we covered My Best Friend's Exorcism and Banicula, but I am not an audiobook person. And because this was a narrator, an editorial narrator, but a narrator nonetheless, these episodes were a little bit more audiobooky, and the audiobooks that I've engaged with in my life, audiobook is reading is audiobook, but because the way that I always approached those texts were nonfiction, and the rest of my people talking listening is primarily nonfiction podcasts, it didn't work for me because of the nature of all of that. I think that if I had been in a little bit more of a radio play situation, I could have gotten to the horror, but I think the soundscape were more confusing to me than they were demonstrative, and so I was left with a lot of like, is this real? Is the narrator unreliable? Is this actually horrifying, or is this metaphor? And it wasn't until I got a chance to read the transcripts, which Steve does a fantastic job of making sure that all of the words that you hear on your podcast are also documented online. That's when I finally made some connections about things that were happening in the story that I totally missed during my 2 listens. And so that I think is why maybe at a David level, the horror wasn't there until I read it, and then I got it.
Yeah, listen, audio fiction isn't for everybody. Most of my relatives simply don't truck with it, which is a real bummer for me, because like I have so many great audio fiction narratives that you should enjoy, but nobody wants them. I just have so many. They're like little chicks in my arms, but nobody wants to adopt. But yeah, no, it's totally fair. Totally fair. I totally get that it's not for everybody. I think that it works as a narrative fiction, but I also love that Steve has everything available for people, especially sometimes I have an audio processing disorder. Sometimes you just need to double check what you heard, and I think that that's great.
Yeah, I definitely was picking that up, that Steve is someone who really cares about accessibility, and I think that's wonderful. I think that's a trend that more podcasts and podcasters and really just anyone that works in some sort of creative media should keep in mind. But I think I'm kind of with David. I think Steve's performance and the writing itself did not really jive with me. It felt a little too purpley for me to fully understand what was going on. Like, he was speaking very like metaphorically, but then he would dive into something concrete, and then he was just using a lot of like Appalachian dialects and like ways of speech that I don't think worked for me as a listener, but perhaps if I were at a campfire with him, it would have been more effective. So, Marilee, I see what you were talking about when you said that these are kind of like campfire stories, especially these early ones, because they're less radio play and more like I'm reading a story to you. But it just did not really work with me. Like that same sense of like I'm not making the connections. I don't really know what just happened because he's just speaking in such a flowery way in terms of like his actual speech and the words that he wrote. Yeah, it just didn't jive with me. But I do think that reading the transcripts does help, and it makes me appreciate the story he is telling more.
Well, listen, horror is all well and good, but that's not the only thing that we are here to discuss. This is an anthology series, and there aren't a lot of characters that carry the story forward in general, especially not in these particular episodes, as most of the people introduced here are dead by the end of the episode that they appear in. How could we possibly discuss this podcast using the concepts of queer theory?
Good question. I personally thought it was easier to draw from the well of feminism for this. As we've talked about before, and we talked about in our very first episode, queer theory kind of is something that emerged from feminist literary theory. And so I think it's easier to kind of look at someone like Sarah, who is our point of view character from like the first two episodes and really the majority of the story. She's young, and she's very much a victim of the social and economic structures that exist in Barlow. The supernatural power that possesses Sarah, which is separate from whatever evil came from the mine, also seems to be like feminine and perhaps associated with the earth. It is called the Green, so automatically I'm going to associate that with like Appalachia itself. So there's some Mother Nature parallels in there. I think that's kind of cool. But I kind of struggle with looking for the queerness of it. What about you two?
I think that you can draw some comparisons between the Green, the natural, and how there are this company. I guess there's just the one company, but there are many that are there to implement exploitive practices that are meant to disrupt the existing nature. And I think that there is a way to read that subversion as a subversion of other queerness, because that is something that we as queer people experience. I did find this stretch of narrative to be a little heteronormative and gender rolesy outside of, and I don't know how far I exceeded the mandate in listening to episodes, but I did listen to the prologue ? Story about the Witch Queen. And that had sort of an inference to the idea that there were these witch sisters, but they weren't really sisters. And so like, were they not like sisters, or were like sisters, like lesbians? And that's an interesting part of like American horror and witches. And I think that's present in a lot of things that are like maybe folk horror adjacent, because of this very idea of like American witches is this sort of sisterhood, and you don't need a man, and the thoughts and styles that were brought over to the quote New World were this idea of like a patriarchally controlled society, and so to buck against that is sort of unnatural to that society, but is very natural to the world, about like found and created families that didn't include or center around men. But wow, that is a lot of insight for something that was like an offhanded reference that I'm really getting off of like a tone shift around the word sisters. That's all I really had to draw from.
No, you're 100% right. I didn't require you to listen to like the prologue and the interlude, which are both mostly about the Witch Queen, who is a really cool and interesting character that carries forward. When we talked about doing the show, you guys asked me to pick out a couple episodes, and I thought that like the introduction to Barlow and the podcast as a whole would be a great place for our discussion on like folk horror to start. I really thought, especially like the stuff around the mine and the bear, you guys would get like a lot of stuff out of. But in an alternate universe, we would be talking about the prologue, the interlude, and like the final interlude about the Witch Queen, and talking specifically about her, because I think that she is a really interesting figure that carries on through the podcast. And yes, like her two mamas, who describe themselves as sisters to other people to explain why they have a close relationship with each other, are implied to be lesbians who use the cover as sisters to escape the harsh, mostly Christian gaze in that time period.
Hey, you know what? Then I'm glad I picked up on that, even though who knows what I listened to on that. I wasn't trying to exceed mandate. I was just playing what my podcast app put in the list, and I was uncertain where to start. So
I'm sorry. I did also
Oh,
go past Merely's Mandate of Heaven. I listened to the interlude, episode 2.5, because I was just like, well,
I listened to that too.
it's between 2 and 3, so I know I'm not supposed
That's what
to.
I said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just like, extra credit, I guess.
It is extra credit. The interlude there, we'll point out when it happens, but Sarah Avery falls asleep at one point, and then in the middle of the night she wakes up and like writes a little manifesto, that as she is possessed by the Witch Queen.
Okay.
Yes, I listened to that.
Yeah.
I think I was referencing that a little earlier when I was like, oh yeah, she was possessed. Yeah. So like, extra credit for any listeners out there if you want to listen to the prologue through episode 3 of Appalachia to know what the hell we're talking about.
It's all good stuff. Yeah, so like the writing team is very pro like queer, and like you will see other queer characters pop up throughout the narrative. But in these particular episodes, I agree, it's pretty faint on the ground for representation here.
That's okay. I mean,
yeah.
Maybe as we discuss some of the beat by beats, we'll end up unearthing some more. Oh no, it's from the dark deeps, but it's gay, so it's okay. If coal is gay, it's okay, is what I'm saying.
Oh my god.
That's clean coal.
Oh my god. Well, they dug coal together is the constant refrain from Justified, my beloved police brutality show. So do either of you guys watch Justified?
I have not seen it. No.
But are there two men who dig coal together, if you know what I'm saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes, the main character is from he's from Appalachia and everything. He like left. He has to go back to Kentucky, in Harlan County, because of he being punished on his job, basically. And the main antagonist there is named Boyd Crowder. And he and Raylan have a very contentious relationship throughout the entirety of the show. And part of the reason why is because they dug coal together, and Boyd Crowder saved Raylan Given's life. And they're all intertwined.
So they're in love.
Yes, they're 100% in love.
Okay, maybe I will have to watch the show. Plus, it's
you
got
do not have to.
It's got what's his name? From Deadwood.
Yes, yeah, it's exactly what's his name from Deadwood.
Yeah, he's like the main guy, right?
Timothy Oliphant. He is incredibly good looking in that show.
Oh,
to be
he's
clear.
so handsome. He's such a handsome man.
He really is. He's a very handsome man.
I
He's
feel like an old lady saying
handsome.
that, though, the way I said that. Oh, he's such a handsome boy.
Yeah, no, listen, I love a propaganda. I know this is a flaw within myself. I don't like medical procedurals because they're too gross. So the only procedural available to me is the cop ones. And I love them. And Justified is an incredibly good show as long as you are down to watch a bunch of people be cops, and Raylan Givens should not be given authority. He's the angriest man in the world.
Hey, as long as you're like recognizing that like the show is propaganda and it's got its flaws and all that stuff, I would say you can enjoy what you like.
Yeah,
It's not good, but it's so good. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Tyler said, "Watch more Bones," is what he just said.
I will not follow my own like practice though. I will not practice what I preach.
Okay. Well, we're not talking about police procedurals. We are talking about the old gods of Appalachia. So let's dive in and talk about the beginnings of the Barlow, Kentucky 1917 story with these first few episodes of season 1. The first episode starts with the narrator talking about the ruins of a schoolhouse. It's the only building left of Barlow over 100 years after the town was destroyed. After discussing how the area was settled, the narrator dives into the perspective of Annie Messer, the last schoolteacher of Barlow, and how things got to be this way. The school year had just started when the mining disaster that heralded the doom of Barlow happened. 62 people died in the number 7 mine. Some people in town were grateful it happened while the miners were on strike, so most of the people who were killed weren't locals. But 2 local men did try to help rescue people and were killed in the blaze, Ed and Pinky Avery.
This scene, this whole part of the episode was so hard to describe for the plot beat by Pete, because it really is just Steve Shell waxing lyrically for 10 minutes about Appalachia. It was like, here's my best, kids. This is what I've got.
Yeah. I feel like that is a fair criticism that I had of the podcast is like, okay, I get it. Like, move on. Talk about the plot.
Fair enough.
Yes, I get it. I talk about the plot. I also want to say, like, there is a very important need to set tone and create the culture of what ultimately the Old Gods of Appalachia podcast has to do. Because this episode, I assume and suppose, merely, also acts as a pilot episode for the series. Because this may be where people start. And so I think when I changed my mind to look at this as a pilot, and, you know, we talked about a weird pilot on Gimmicks earlier this month. Pilots have to do so much. Mm-hmm. They have to set up the audience's expectation of what is to come. They have to either introduce characters or introduce the concept of characters that will be to come. And so this is doing all of that. It's trying to set tone, and it's trying to get you on the hook to listen for more. And it feels like the hook was very strongly in the vibes category and not so much on the plot area for this first enter into Barlow.
Yeah,
it threw me off too.
That doesn't bother me normally. It does when I was like, I have to give David something to say here. And I don't know what I should put. But, like, I think that the vibes are really cool. Like, I like hearing about how the town was formed. I thought it was neat. I think that there's nothing that we could do to describe it that, like, gives you the experience of listening to it. So.
Yeah. I would have happily just said the vibes are set. But I was happy to read what you wrote as well.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of think that's what the prologue is for, but I also never thought, well, no, I wouldn't say never, but I'm just going to assume, and you know what assuming does, that people would start with the prologue and not episode 1, but not everyone has my brain. So I also have to make room for that as well. So I could see where you're coming from, David, that this kind of works as a pilot, especially because this is an anthology. And there's not really characters that you're going to follow over a long period of time. We get kind of snapshots into their lives and then bye-bye. So what is the constant? It's Appalachia. It's the setting. So you have to give that its proper due. I think still it doesn't really work for me too well just because it kind of lingered on that for too long for me personally. But I do think like thinking about it more as a pilot episode does certainly help with justifying why he made the choices he did.
Yeah. I also think that it's interesting to have a character in and of their narrator themselves. This is not a detached narrator. This is a present and editorial narrator. And it feels like that is a character as much as all the people that the narrator will be covering in the story. And I wrote here, maybe Marilee can shed some light on whether or not the narrator and Steve Shell are similar, different, or what's the deal here? Is Steve Shell a character who is the narrator, or is the narrator a separate character from Steve Shell?
I feel like the narrator is a different character from Steve Shell, but there's simply no way of me knowing. I am not a very involved member of the Old Gods of Appalachia community, so I don't really know the guy. So this is all that I have for you.
Yeah, are we dealing with a Lemony Snicket situation, or is this Daniel Handler, you know?
Wow. David, read more books is what I just heard you say.
So there's a really incredible other podcast that I will get you to talk about someday. That's a threat called The Magnus Archives, where the main...
Yeah.
You know, The Magnus Archives, one of the biggest audio fiction podcasts ever. And the main character of that show, which is like the character, he is a character in the show, happens to have the same name of the writer of the show. And I will tell you that the narrator and Steve Shell are different people in that regard, because he did not make the same mistake that poor John did for the Magnus Archives.
Okay. That is good to know. I mean, it doesn't particularly matter, because like anytime anyone's performing, they are a different version of themselves. The three of us are different versions of ourselves when we record the podcast than we are the rest of our lives, in small ways, subtle ways, big ways, whatever. And so it's not really a critique, but it was interesting to me that the narrator was so editorial, but then also did like the follow me on Patreon. Like, so it's you know, that's not to say like that's good or bad. It just was present, and there even seemed to be characterization in some of the intro and outro on both sides coming from Steve Shell, which made me wonder like, oh, is the narrator really close to his character? I just thought it was interesting.
It actually fucked me up a little bit, because then he would finish the story and then the song would play, and then he would start talking again, and I'm just like, oh, that was the interlude. Now we're going to hear more about what happened to Sarah Avery. Oh, just kidding. This is about the Patreon. Never mind.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You know, this is actually a great spot to talk about the song, because the Old Gods of Appalachia has an intro and an outro using two very different songs. I know David is very pro like intros and stuff. Do you want to talk about that at all, or?
I didn't even clock I clocked that it was folk music. I do, again, week 4. I'm here. I do know that music just randomly happens in all these media. Somebody gets a guitar from God knows where, and just music starts happening. But I didn't really clock the songs, except that they were vibe setting in both the intro and the outro. Like, the outro was a very nice, I could imagine credits going by. And I like that it was used as an underplay for Steve's outro, which was both like content-y plus Patreon-y.
Which they don't have anymore, as they made clear at the start of every episode.
That's listen. There's one day, future David will have to go and put something on all of our episodes from June of last year till now, and that, you know, that's just part of the gig. I understand that. That doesn't bother me.
Real quick, plot stuff.
Yeah,
I do. So we talked a lot about the tone that's being set here, but we do dig into Barlow and the happenings happening here. I do like that the narrator specifically calls out about the scabs, but he's not really judgmental of them. He's more just kind of like very clear, like, this is just who they are. But also he's clear that these are Black men from Cincinnati. Ohio and Kentucky are very close to each other, so it's not unusual. So I think that's cool. I think it's also cool that he specifically called out that they're Black men because, again, we kind of think about this time period, and I don't think the idea of race shows up too much in it because, like, what is this, 1917 or something, 1907? It's like early 20th century. What we're taught in school doesn't really like cover what are like Black people doing during this time period. And so I think it's cool that Steve specifically calls out that these are going to be Black people that are coming in, and then they end up becoming victims, spoiler alert, to the happenings in the mine, which are all because of the company that owns the mine. Like, none of this would have happened if it weren't for the company.
Right, exactly.
We did not talk about it, but I will say that the 4th episode of the Barlow, Kentucky saga does talk about the miners, the Black miners in specific, and like it's mostly their narrative, which I thought was really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So it had been a few days since Sarah, Pinky's daughter, had come down to school, so Annie convinced the local minister to take her up there to their homestead. They found Carol Ann swinging from a tree in the front yard, the house destroyed, and no sign of Sarah. The narrative then switches over to Sarah's point of view as she runs from her house into the woods. She wasn't scared of the things chasing her, not yet. Even though they were shadows, the light seemed to slide off of... Sorry, let me retake that. She wasn't scared of the things chasing her, not yet. Even though they were shadows, the light seemed to slide off of and dog-shaped. However, they were still much larger than dogs. That morning, Sarah had woken up to discover her mother dead. She had started to walk down the road to find help in town when she met her dead father walking down the road toward her, partially still on fire. This thing possessing her father tried, not very successfully, to pretend to be her father, but eventually it just tried to reach out for her, and Sarah ran.
Exit outro music starts now. Boom, boom.
Really spooky. Like, really spooky shit happening here. I was a little confused as far as, like, what time are things happening, which the transcript certainly helped, and reading your notes apparently also helps. But I think that this is very effective. I could see this happening in, like, a horror TV show. Like, it kind of gives off, like, a True Detective vibe, like, from the first season, where there's just these very stark, horrifying images, but they're incredibly iconic in a way.
Yeah, I get that. The dead miner, like, being, hey, sugar pup, and, like, that narration, that's one of the things that's always stuck in my head. Like, when I remember how good this podcast is, that's one of the things that I think of.
Yeah, anytime we're with characters, I'm feeling so much better about things. I did get very confused on timeline. And again, I think that's how I process information. But I was delighted reading Marilee's notes that this all like linked in together and had some more important fluidity of the story that I just didn't get in even reading the transcripts. And that's just more about me being stupid than the audio itself.
It's a little confusing. I think we could all agree it's a little confusing. Having a little bit more experience with the narrative, I'm a little bit better able to follow where Steve is taking us. But it's the first couple episodes. He's doing a good job.
Oh yeah, like that's the thing is I feel like this show has potential. So even though I haven't listened to any of the recent stuff, knowing what you have told me, Marilee, and being able to see like, oh, there is certainly talent here. I'm sure he has worked out many of the quabbles that we have had.
But yeah, that's the whole first episode. It's very like a quick little bit. Is there anything about the first episode that else we wanted to discuss before we move to episode 2?
Just that I love Sarah's POV. I thought these sequences were so wonderful, and I love that they carry over into the next part.
Yeah, the next episode is pretty much all in Sarah's POV, and it's great. I love, like, Sarah Avery is kind of the main driving force behind season 1. Like, it's all about what happened in Barlow, Kentucky in this time period, and, like, the mine explosion and everything that's going on. But, like, Sarah's kind of the key, and, like, the first couple episodes and the last couple episodes are all about her dealing with what's going on, and I think that it really makes for a very solid narrative.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
So in episode 2, which is named The Schoolhouse, this episode starts just about where the last one left off, with Sarah Avery on the run from the thing that is not her father. It tries to beg with her to come with it before it seems like something picks it up and tosses it to the ground before grinding it into the dirt and gravel. Sarah runs again, this time into the woods. Eventually, she falls down a hill and into the undergrowth. Sarah walked further into the weeds until there was nowhere else for her to go. And just as she's like starting to break down into tears about this horrible, no good, very bad morning, her Uncle Eddie appears. His corpse is animated in that same horrible way that her father's was. It at first tries to convince her to come with it, when Eddie breaks free of the thing possessing it, and told Sarah to run. Unfortunately, again, there's nowhere for her to go, so a bear materializes out of the natural environment and destroys the thing wearing Eddie before it dissolves back into nature. Exhausted and scared, Sarah faints.
A bear!
This was the bear. Okay, listen. I do love a bear, but when I was listening to it, I was like, is this a real bear? What just happened? This is where I was losing tenure with, like, what was real, what was not real, and that was part of, like, what was taking me out. And I think this is where the soundscapes in particular started to play a little bit more intensely, and that's where I was like, oh, is the soundscape, like, or the background music that you hear as the narration's happening, the soundscape, is this indicative to me that we're in, like, a reality break? And that's, again, I just started getting very confused here, because I was really into it when Uncle Eddie was around. He was really creepy, and then there was a bear, and then I got confused.
Understandable. It, like, appears out of nowhere, and then, like, the way that that's described is, like, dissolving into, like, a statue of a bear made out of nature, and then nothing. Very confusing.
Yeah. So, what is y'all's read on this bear, then, I guess, is my question. Is the bear a malevolent force? Is Uncle Eddie or what's possessing him a malevolent force? Are they the same force? Are they different? What was I supposed to take here?
I think it's purposefully unclear.
Okay. Well, good job.
Yeah. This to me seems like a show where things just kind of happen as part of the overall mystery that is Appalachia. And so I don't specifically know why, because the bear does help out Sarah by destroying the thing that was possessing her uncle's body. But it also, like, I don't know. Is it the thing that, like, kind of pushes Eddie's spirit out completely at the same time? Like, I was kind of confused. To me, it read as, like, the supernatural entity that is just Appalachia has manifested a bear to save Sarah, because Sarah is going to become, in episode 2.5, kind of like this vessel for the witch, the witch queen. Which I don't. It had been a very long time since I had listened to that episode about the Witch Queen, so I totally forgot about all that. But it still kind of works for me as just like a manifestation of Appalachia saying, like, you should not be attacking young girls who are victims of people who are using up my precious, like, resources.
I like that.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I have real answers, so I'm not going to say.
Interesting.
Oh, okay. Well, so knowing that there are real answers is fun and good to know.
Yes.
Yeah,
agreed.
like, I think it's all, like, a little bit more implied, but, like, there is a reason why Sarah is connected to the Green and the Witch Queen.
Okay.
Okay.
Fun.
I'm looking forward to reading the Wikipedia article.
Oh, baby, you're after my own heart. I love reading the Wikipedia article for horror stuff.
Girl, me too. Big Wikipedia fan. All right, so When Sarah woke up again, she was in the schoolhouse, her head in Miss Annie's lap with her stroking Sarah's hair. She was confused how they could have found her, but as she was safe, she tried to ignore it, before the sound of fire and screams from the town surrounded them. The miners who died in the collapse were taking the revenge on Barlow. Miss Annie tried to comfort Sarah, but something was wrong with her voice. Eventually, Sarah managed to turn her head and saw that Miss Annie had been killed and reanimated too, just like her father and uncle. As the building around them started to collapse, Sarah looked out past the burning town to the woods and begged the Green to take the town back. Just then, rain started to fall. When the storm was over, the only thing left was the schoolhouse and Sarah sleeping for the first time in days.
And so this was fun because we were sort of full circle with the idea that the schoolhouse is the only thing back.
Mhm.
And so I was like, cool, we've learned the story of Barlow. There are some unanswered questions. And then there was still more to go through, and that's fine. But this felt so tidy here, and I did like that.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of giving Evil Dead to me. It's just like Sarah is our Ash, and she just can't catch a break. Everyone around her is turning into Deadites and trying to make her like also murdered. And there's like they're in Appalachia. I'm pretty sure Evil Dead takes place in West Virginia. Like it's just like a whole thing.
Is it really? I don't know why. I thought it was in upstate New York.
I mean, it might be like the location just kind of gives like Appalachia because it's like kind of rocky and mountainous, but there's also lots of forests. So, I don't know. I don't know geography. I'm from Florida. They didn't teach that shit.
No, they sure don't.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that's the same mountain range. And so while we don't think about upstate New York as Appalachia, it is the Appalachian Mountains. And our sort of definition of Appalachia being a little bit more Midwest is a little arbitrary. So I think that it's fine to put... by the way, I've never seen The Evil Dead. I'm only familiar with Ash as a character from Poker Night at some sort of poker game that I had on my Steam.
Wow, I forgot about that game. Thank you for reminding me.
Oh my god.
No problem.
I think so. We kind of touched on this at the beginning. I think it's kind of interesting that the folk horror community, first of all, is not worshiping some ancient deity from their like European past, that they have then brought with them as part of their colonization effort. Instead, it is something that they didn't know has been there this whole time, and they end up becoming victims because they have either not acknowledged the Green as an entity or have pissed her off because they have misused her. They have abused her.
Okay.
They've taken from her.
I like
Yeah,
that.
I love that.
And that's so different from the other folk horror that we've seen because it's always been like there's an outsider presence. Sarah is kind of our outsider in the sense that she is a young girl, and every other character that we've met is an adult. I think it's kind of fascinating to see that they are the ones being punished instead of being the ones punishing the outsider.
Mm.
Ooh, that's really fun and smart. I like that a lot. You guys all have such really wonderful and thoughtful critiques. Here I am just saying, I like that Sarah wasn't rescued by Annie and like it wasn't a good thing. I thought that was fun. Subversion. It was nice.
Yeah. The subversion of a caring matron figure of a school teacher into a monster was sort of unexpected. It did play on like it sort of was the thing that you do in a horror franchise or horror genre is to take someone who shouldn't be scary and make them scary.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think like it wasn't particularly a queer interpretation because it was like living that sort of trope, but that didn't make it ineffective. I think a little child having its head in the lap of someone who should be taking care of it, that person ends up being a monster, is effectively spooky.
Yeah.
The narrative continues with episode 3, and in this episode we wind the clock back before the explosion in the number 7 tunnel. It turns out that there was originally a fire that everyone survived and was put out before the big explosion that happened less than an hour later. The people of Barlow took all of the injured and the bodies they could get to the church. And we are following sort of the view of Pastor Cletus Garvin, who has been serving at the Tabernacle of the Elder Covenant for 7 years. But before that, he used to work in the mine himself. But then he got sick with black lung and had to leave the only job he'd ever had. Kindly, the foreman of the mine said that Cletus could keep his house, and he did have a pension, but he worried how his family would survive. On the last week of his job, Cletus worked mostly alone and half hoped that he would die on the job so that his family would get more benefits before he heard whispers in the dark. They would help him, take away his sickness, but in return, they wanted him to work for them. They needed a man on the outside of the mine, and Cletus agreed.
Dun dun dun.
Girl again here, timeline. Even in reading this back, like we start and then we jump and then we jump. I was so confused where the timeline was. I felt like I needed a graph.
Yeah, I definitely, like, as you were reading it back, it's like, I could have made this more clear. And if I could have made it more clear, Steve Shell definitely could have.
I was like, what timeline is this? So many things. But I here's the thing, is because we're a podcast that talks about media, we dig deep into this stuff. And that's where a lot of my critiques are coming from. When I zoom out and I think about the story overall, yes, it makes sense. He used to be a miner. He became the pastor. He's involved with these voices somehow in his role of the pastor, and he's taking care of the people who were subject to injury. But in the moment of living it, it becomes a little bit hard to like keep the threads in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly doesn't help the writing and performance style. Uses a lot of like very flowery language, very descriptive and vivid language, but it ends up kind of cluttering up the intention, like the meaning of what is trying to be communicated in terms of plot. So that did kind of bother me. I'm with you on that, David. I think though that when Steve does dig down deep into like the character's perspective and what the characters are thinking, either in that moment or across a period of time, I think that ends up coming across really strongly. To me, this actually had a moment like that really stuck out to me, where Cletus is hoping that he dies in the mine, so that his family will be cared for. I think that is, I wouldn't say it's personally relatable, because I've never been in a mine. Thankfully, I've been very privileged to work very cushy jobs for most of my life.
Wow, the inference here is that Tyler has wanted to die on the job, but the only thing that sets him apart is that he never worked in a mine. That was what I just interpreted.
Well, to my anyone from my job that's listening, that is not true. Maybe in other jobs I've worked, but not in my current job. So my point being, though, that I think in 2025, that's something that a lot of people do actually relate to, because we are living in a renewed golden age, you could think of it as, where a lot of people are having to do really shitty jobs for little pay, or just very emotionally and physically toiling jobs for very little pay. There's no real agreement on how we can get payments increased. I mean, like, obviously plans exist, but no one's committing to them. And like labor protections are being torn down left and right. And it's extremely difficult for anyone to unionize in this country without some sort of very punishing blowback by the corporate overlords. I think the idea that if someone in 2025 were working in a job where they were like, God, like, I hope I die at this job so that my family can be cared for by the company that basically owns this town, I think that's very feasible, and I think that's very realistic, and it's very upsetting. I wish it were not the case, but we have fallen into the old cliche of like history repeats itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I put it in the notes specifically because they say it in the episode, and like it's uncommented upon. But like him being like, well, luckily the foreman says I'll get to keep the house, because of course the coal mine owns his house. They live in like the company store is where they get all of their food. Like they are trapped in hell, basically, that some people still want us to return to. I'm never living in a company town. And it's just it's a real bummer. And like I get that. I get him being like, if I die, my wife will get better benefits. So, maybe something will happen. Fingers crossed. It's fucked up. It's deeply fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know who else thinks it's fucked up? The whispers in the mind. Go, those are such good guys. No. Christ.
Yeah, I did like the whispers in the mind. I think we talked about this when we talked about themes. Like, I like the idea of this despair for Cletus. And I did like Cletus's POV too.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about Sarah before, but Cletus was a fun character once we got into this part of his story. I really, really liked it. Because he was fun to track. And I think maybe that's what I need a central character to like focus on.
Yeah, I genuinely think that this show is at its best when it's in the mind of a character and they're thinking about and reflecting on their own experiences. Because I think Steve Shell is an incredible character writer in this way. Like you really, like you understand what he's doing and why he's doing it. Like Cletus is not a good dude and he does some pretty heinous shit. And like in a later episode, like I never put his name in our notes, but like if you're keeping careful track, Annie Messer went to the Avery homestead with the minister, who is, as you now know, a bad guy, and you discover that he did some bad shit to Annie Messer later. So I think that like tracking that and like in his it's all really good and I liked it a lot. But speaking of him being a bad dude, let's get into his descent into darkness, and I don't mean mining. So Cletus worked at the deacon of the church for years by that point already, and though he hadn't before taking on this covenant, this agreement, he hadn't had much talent for preaching. The voices really helped him with that. And when the former pastor died suddenly, by the way, he was a natural fit to replace him. Mostly the voices didn't ask him for much, just to consider different interpretations of the scripture. As well as introducing to that congregation the practice of speaking in tongues, which is a real thing that's actually very popular in that the location and time period. Sometimes he also laid on hands to help with the sick, and sometimes it helped. And if folks died faster, well, that's a different kind of a blessing. So the day of the explosion in the number 7 mine, no one really questioned the sacrifices that Garvin asked them to make. Over the years, Garvin had rationalized a lot of what the voices were making him do, but at the end of the episode, as he's sitting there listening to what they want him to do, he knew this time it wouldn't help anyone. And that's the end of the episode. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And the episode sort of ends with this like revelation that Cletus was, I mean, it did the math that you did for us earlier, because I was, again, just not in the right headspace to do the math girl meme. When I was like, oh, a pastor. I remember a pastor from the first episode. I did not. So I did need Steve to be like, and then he met Annie and had to go explore that. And I was like, oh yeah, that shit. And so I did need and appreciate that like final loop. And that was fun. That was really fun.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you there, David. I think this plotline is really fascinating. I think there's something about like a Southern Gothic sort of storyline like this just hits really well, even though I don't know. I think it's kind of up for debate whether Kentucky counts as the South or not. But I just think
definitely Appalachia Gothic. It's a whole other thing.
It's certainly Appalachian Gothic, and I think that's really cool. I think this really dives deeply into that. We're playing with a lot of like American iconography here and making it horrific, which is one of my favorite things in horror to do. And the idea that this pastor could be evil, I think, is also really cool because I came up with like a Catholic background, so the priests are all supposed to be good and nice and blah blah blah. Of course, in reality, that's not the case. But it's just the idea that someone who is meant to serve God and be a good person can be evil to the point that they are worshiping someone else, essentially, and making evil things happen, I think is really cool and is very malicious and unnerving for an American mindset, because I think the American mindset, especially because it's like a Protestant sort of mindset, is that if you are a good person doing good deeds, or you are supposed to be like a priest or a pastor or whatever, you're supposed to be a figurehead for the community and people listen to you. And this is an evil shepherd of the flock, and I think that's great. I think that's always a fun twist. We should really cover like evil religion in a theme someday.
Well, I wonder if we ever will.
Stink guy. Oh my god. Only we had any idea what we're gonna cover next.
As if the whole year has been planned.
Yeah.
We're all being so coy here, but we will continue to be coy until future months are announced. So you just have to keep listening. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Good thing about that. One of my favorite bits here is the fact that the church turns out to have already been named the Tabernacle of the Elder Covenant. Like, that is so ominous for what it ends up being, like a covenant with whom. But like the fact that it was already named that, fucking wild shit. I love it.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about it when we talked about Midsommar, because of the fake people of the Herga were written with a little bit of like Swedish stuff and a lot of Christian stuff. It is always interesting when there is interplay between this sort of Christian God, the new God, and this sort of old God world. We had a lot of that in The Wicker Man. We had a little bit of Midsommar, not a ton of it in Hobbs Barrow, with I guess a little bit because there was that church and that was a set piece that you had to steal things from to complete your adventure quests. Yeah, I like these things interacting with each other. And as I have grown my appreciation for this idea of the subgenre of folk horror, I have really appreciated that the way these play in, because the Tabernacle of the Elder, whatever you just said, Marilee.
The Elder Covenant.
The Elder Covenant, that I could probably see that not down this street. We're Catholics, thank you very much. But I could see that down the street of an American town almost anywhere.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It sounds like that's a perfectly cromulent church name.
Yeah.
I love that. It's true, though.
It's great.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what else will happen in the next couple episodes of Old Gods of Appalachia. It's up to you, listener, to find out. Or be like me and check it out on Wikipedia, which you should consider donating to, by the way.
Yes, you should. Everybody should donate to Wikipedia. It's very important, we promise.
Before we wrap up, let's revisit some of the questions that brought us here together. Now that we've had our conversation, what do you all think about this as an entry of horror media?
I think it works as horror. I think I actually really liked this conversation that we had, especially with you, Marilee, because you are a big fan of this podcast. I have a much more renewed appreciation for it. I will admit to being kind of frustrated as I was listening because the problems that I had with it never really went away and just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I definitely appreciate what Steve is doing a lot more now. So this actually made me like the podcast a bit more. I don't think I'm going to be an avid listener of these next couple episodes because I would like to get into it when there is more of a cast and it is more of a radio play, because much like David, that's something my brain can glom onto a little bit more easily. But I do find the ideas that are being communicated here really cool. I think Steve's got a good thing on his hands, and I'm very glad that it has become so successful, especially because it is kind of like an independent property that's not owned by any big motion picture company. That's not owned by Sony or Universal or Disney or whatever. This is its own thing that's made by the creatives themselves, and is supported by the community. So I'm really glad that they've had so much success. What about the rest of you?
Yeah, it's horror. It's horror audio fiction, which is not for everybody's bag, but I liked it. I think that the ideas and concepts within these first couple episodes are perfectly within not just horror, but the folk horror sub-genre, and I think it fits very nicely.
Yeah, I had a good enough time with this. I know this isn't exactly for me. I think our conversation put this a little bit more in the horror column for me than my first impressions of it, because I was just more confused than I was horrified. And confusion is a type of fear, but it's not kind of what I come for usually. And now that we've had a chance to talk about some of the highs and lows and things that went into it, I think that I'm a little bit more prone to say yeah, this is a horror entry. And it does seem, like 80 episodes in, obviously some things have gone differently, and there's some new and fertile ground to explore, and that might be something that I look forward to spending a little bit of time with in the future. what about our other question? Is this media queer? Did either of you get a more nuanced view of queerness through our conversation of today's media?
I'm afraid to say no, not really. I think that I think this podcast absolutely has some queer themes like in the shadows. Like there's absolutely potential for it. And because it's an anthology series, I'm certain those must have come up, especially knowing that Steve is really much an ally.
Mm-hmm.
So I think these couple episodes, not really. I think there's definitely some feminist theory in there. I think we have some wonderful anti-capitalist theory in there. I think if you really want to like spend quite a bit of time focusing on this Barlow arc, you could probably find something. However, within these couple episodes that we've had, it just did not really seem very queer to me.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it was annoyingly heterosexual, which is a phrase that I find myself using a lot on this podcast to describe certain things. But I also didn't feel like there was a lot of queer ore to mine in the depths of this section of Appalachia. It certainly seems like in other stories there will be.
Listen, I don't know what you're talking about. If you just keep going and digging, you'll definitely find queer stuff there.
I feel perhaps like the thesis point of the story is to tell me to stop doing that, Marilee.
I don't know what you're talking about. You should listen to the voices.
Although
the voices are just all Marilee.
If you that is true. If you are a big gay Balrog, you can find me directly on Blue Sky at DMUMA. That's DMUMA. Hit me up if you are Shadow and Fire. We can talk.
Me too. When you're done with him, callupthedead.bsky.social, or just hit me up there. I will get sunblock.
I love that Tyler's willing to do sloppy seconds if it's a Balrog.
It's a Balrog, David. Like, that thing is ancient. That was there when the world was created.
Same. But Marilee, like, I know that, okay, so it wasn't perfect for us, but
yeah, that's fine. That's not for everybody.
I love you sharing it. I had a lot more fun in this conversation. And that's going to be true for other media that we bop into. And so I think this is great. We should be bringing things that are fun and discoverable. And I hope that if this sounds like something that you all want to check out, all of these are available wherever you listen to podcasts. And you're already listening to us, so I know you know how to use a podcast device. You can find it by typing in Old Gods of Appalachia. And as we mentioned throughout the episode, Steve has done a really fantastic job of making the transcripts available. So I think that if you even wanted to try before you buy, you could go on and read some of those transcripts and then get a sense of maybe where you'd want to start listening to a lot of the work. But some brilliantly designed soundscapes in it, even though they took me out a little bit. But that's a David thing, not a you thing.
So does anyone have any other final thoughts for this episode? Anything else that you wanted to point out? Or other conversations you might want to have?
I have not played the role-playing game that Monty Cook's created in partnership with Old Gods of Appalachia, but my brother did fund the Kickstarter, so I do have it in my house. And I've looked through it. It's really incredible. Monty Cook makes incredible games in general. And this one seems really, really special. So I genuinely think that the world that Old Gods created, I know that you're audio horror fiction and this one in particular are not for everybody. I totally respect and get that. And thank you guys for both coming along on this journey with me. I appreciate you more than words can say, but I really love it. And I think that it's got such great stuff in it. And I think this is such a rich and delightful world, and they've mined it in such an expert way that there is absolutely no way of greater horrors creeping out. And I love to see it.
Yeah, I'm sure nothing else bad happens after this.
Yeah, absolutely not. They all stop digging at just the right spot.
The rest of the series is actually just talking about going on an Appalachian trail.
Well, listen, what a great time for me to remind everyone that I hiked 120 miles on the Appalachian Trail. I don't think I ever left Virginia, though. I think I was in Virginia the entire time, unfortunately. I don't think we made it into Kentucky.
Marilee, can
Oh
you
my
take us
God.
out of here before David does another humble brag?
I would love to. So thank you all so much for listening to this episode. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to complete our very own social media ritual, you can find us on Instagram and Blue Sky at FairCodedPod.
Of course, this podcast is a proud part of the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective. If you'd like to listen to more queer media podcasts, you can check out the full roster of our shows at glitterjaw.com. And if you're not already listening, our Falling with Style colleagues have been doing a special presentation of some great non-Pixar movies and TV aimed at younger audiences. You can check those out at the Falling with Style feed.
Ooh.
But you should also stay tuned to this feed and join us next week as we close out our Queer as Folk Horror Month by running from the grief and guilt of our past right back into the woods of Sweden. Sweden again? In the 2017 film The Ritual. But for now, we will simply say goodbye.
Bye.